The Record of Ragnarok gods could have defeated humanity in the first 7 rounds. Absolute domination. Here is how Valhalla could have achieved this victory, but first, here are some rules. The human fighters go in the same order as the real story. For example, round 1, Lubu, followed by Adam, Sasaki, Jack, etc. I cannot use any god that has not participated in the main tournament, which at the current minute includes Odin and Anubis, and I cannot use the canon matchups in the story, meaning no Thor vs Lubu or Zeus vs Adam, only brand new ones. So for round 1, the god I have chosen to defeat Lubu is Poseidon. So I think we all can agree that the god of the seas is faster than the Chinese warrior, alongside having a better portrayal with his comparisons to Zeus and even Hades considering him the most worthy to be a king. I will grant that Lubu's Sky Eater is a stronger attack when it comes to overall output of power, but his personality and fighting style would likely get him killed quite fast. His attack would be a threat to Poseidon, and very well, if landed directly, should be capable of finishing him, but doing that is quite unlikely. I do think their weapons would interact in an interesting way, but most people watching who have some understanding of the Record of Ragnarok power ranking can find this result very clear. Therefore, Poseidon wins round 1 for the gods. Now round 2, they are up against Adam. Likely the hardest matchup to select, considering we can't pick Zeus and have to deal with his Eyes of the Lord somehow. This is potentially the most overpowered ability in Ragnarok to this day, and allows Adam to copy and outright surpass a god's technique or ability, alongside him seemingly being faster than his opponent when using this. The human fighter most deemed as the strongest to this day by a large majority of the fandom as well, and you can even argue if Zeus had 10 fights with Adam, the first human would win most of them. This is considering the luck element in their fight and his overall defeat in the story. So the only one I think who actually stands a chance on the gods roster so far is Beelzebub. So this is how he could potentially win. The god's power connects to the use of vibrations, something Adam should be able to copy with no problem at all. However, Beelzebub has this divine weapon given to him by Hades, which overall enhances Beelzebub's vibration ability, connecting to an argument many fans have within the Ragnarok fandom, whether Adam can copy the power of divine weapons. At the current point, it could be the case, but absolute confirmation, not really. So Adam on a base-to-base level with Beelzebub will be superior, but considering Beelzebub's use of the divine weapon and how it amplifies his offense and defense, he could very well take the lead in that aspect. However, you still have the speed issue where Adam will outright be faster than Beelzebub, seemingly no matter what. Which brings us to the key way the god can win this matchup, with the use of his ultimate technique, Chaos, something that literally blows up the entire arena and only requires his opponent to touch it once in any way to have the inner organs of them pretty much destroyed. Furthermore, if Adam was to use Chaos due to his Eyes of the Lord ability, it's possible he could get himself destroyed and killed as well, as when Beelzebub used it one time during the fight against Tesla, it inflicted major damage on himself. And a common theme of every Record of Ragnarok fight is how the gods are innately more durable or have more endurance than the human fighters. So it's possible if Chaos lands or Adam is required to use Chaos, that will result in his defeat. So I'll say, based on definitive claims about the extent of Adam's ability not really being that clear, and the counter in a sense due to the self-harming aspect of Beelzebub's abilities, that's how he can end up winning. With also being possible some Satan aspects could take control, but we can't say for certain. So with all this said, I think I've made it pretty clear how and why Beelzebub could win this matchup. So moving on to round 3, we have Sasaki Kojiro, and for his opponent, I have chosen Apollo. So when it comes to most people's ranking in the fandom, Sasaki and Apollo are around the same tier for the most part, at least to people who actually understand what's going on. But one issue facing Sasaki is how he only truly becomes a top tier at the end of his Poseidon fight, after he went through all that scanning and of course the insane feat of scanning all of creation at once, outright surpassing Poseidon. However, it's important to note he was not at this power right at the start of his Poseidon fight, and if his godly opponent doesn't allow him to do a similar thing, it's possible Sasaki would get destroyed by many characters people would deem as weaker than him. On top of that, Apollo has many means to actually defeat him. I don't think it's controversial to say that Sasaki at the start of his Poseidon fight, that level of power is no match for Apollo. Even if he successfully scans some elements of the fight, it's very likely that Apollo with his arrow will ensure his victory. So I think this win for the god is pretty clear. So with that, the scores are now 3-0. Round 4 is Jack the Ripper, and for him I have placed in Loki. A matchup that could have happened in the main series and make a lot of sense on reflection. Loki was the main commentator throughout Jack's fight, and Jack was a commentator throughout Loki's fight against Simo, with both of them tricking one another throughout both of their showings. I will grant Jack is fighting in London for this matchup, pretty much his domain expansion you can call it, an aspect that will give him a big advantage in this fight. However, considering Loki's ability to summon the other gods, clone himself, and have vision throughout the entire arena, I think with all this and the power demonstrated from these summons, he will likely be able to overwhelm Jack. It's not like he has a sniper like Simo can snipe Loki from anywhere. He has various means and tricks he can try out, and I do believe this fight will be quite close. However, considering all Loki's insane abilities and how Jack could be defeated with a few of them landing direct blows, I will be giving it to the Norse god. Yes, Jack has the ability to turn his own blood into a divine weapon that can be used for offensive and defensive means. However, I firmly believe he'll be overwhelmed by Loki with his ability. Now on to round 5. The opponent I have chosen to defeat Raiden is Susanoo, the battle between two Japanese characters. As a whole, I don't really rate Raiden that high, and I think any matchup between him and a weapon user won't go that well for him. Susanoo, while personally I have issues with his character, it cannot be ignored that he's a top tier when it comes to abilities. He will without a doubt slice Raiden up and has the skill to dominate throughout this fight. Therefore, I don't think it's controversial to say that he wins, and I believe most people can agree without requiring me to go into major detail. Now on to round 6, a very interesting opponent the gods need to deal with, Buddha, who changes sides. This is remaining the same for today's What If video, with there only really being one character remaining on the gods roster who I think can definitively defeat Buddha, that being Zeus, the supreme god of the Greek pantheon and ruler of Valhalla. His fist that surpasses time, I think, is his main path to victory. Buddha's future sight works in a way where he sees the soul of every living creature, and within the Ragnarok world, the soul moves before the body, allowing him to always know what's coming next. However, Zeus's fist that surpasses time is kinda a counter to that. Buddha has no real way to deal with it. Yes, he'll technically know it's coming, but being able to react or respond, just not the case. He'll see himself getting slammed in the back of the head by a Zeus punch. This is a matchup that almost happened in the series as well, and I do think, narratively speaking, the authors would make it insanely close considering Buddha and Zeus's portrayal since the start of the introductions and even now in the current Ragnarok story. However, based on showings and Zeus's ability to outright spam that attack in his Adamas form, I think that will give him the victory, and Yes, you can argue some wacky stuff for Buddha, but definitively speaking, I think Zeus has this. Now on to round 7, where we have Hu Wang. The final victory for humanity is required, and this one is very hard to choose. I changed up a lot of times, but the one I believe that can actually do it is 4. So right off the bat, Hu Wang does have a number of ways to deal with 4's techniques if you argue it the right way, such as 4's divine weapon technically being alive, so his abilities should work on it in a similar way to what happened in the conclusion of the Hades fight. On top of that, his ability to land those breath orbs to nerf 4 will be very effective, and his other defensive and offensive means should cause a problem, but my main argumentation comes down to a direct comparison between 4 and Hades. Overall, I think you can agree that 4, when it comes to destructive power and overall who's stronger when it comes to that aspect, he is superior to Hades. That includes with the use of his divine weapon and his own power. And Hu Wang was kinda at his limit when dealing with the strength wielded by Hades. So 4, who I deem as stronger than that, should technically be able to overwhelm him. And if I'm being honest, I don't really see Hu Wang's defensive means dealing with 4 when he literally chucks his Giga Hammer directly at you with the potential of one-shotting the Chinese king. So with all this said, I do think 4 is stronger and is more likely than not going to win this matchup, but I can't say it's absolutely definitive. This is definitely a hard one to choose, considering I've already used other top tiers in the previous matchups. Perhaps I could change one, such as put 4 against Sasaki and maybe Apollo against Hu Wang. Perhaps he has more of a chance, but this is the first 7 rounds where I believe the gods can clear humanity, pretty much ensuring they don't need to fight Tesla in round 8, who based on the remaining gods, I don't think any of them can actually defeat that legendary human. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want me to do one on how humanity could potentially win the first 7 rounds and clear the gods, leave a like. If this video gets to, I guess, 1k likes, I'll drop that video right away. But check out the playlist with all the other Ragnarok videos, and that's it guys. Peace.